Promote your brand here at Viral Hip Hop News. Hit me, Sam Ant, at dlsmediainc1@gmail.com, dlsmediainc1@gmail.com. Let's go.
Hot off the presses. Grab your exclusive merch at the Viral Hip Hop Shop. Protect your energy at all costs. And you tired of all these self-proclaimed goats? Well, be a goat killer exclusively at the Viral Hip Hop Shop. Link in the description.
Welcome to another episode of the Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. I'm your brother, Old God, from Hip Hop News Uncensored, and sitting across from me is my co-host.
What up, y'all? It's your man, Sam Ant, CEO, Viral Hip Hop News. You're in the building for a very special edition of the Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. Oh, God, what's good, my brother?
What's up? What's up? We got a special live show lined up for you guys tonight. A powerful attorney out of New York City, Dmitriy Shakhevich. I hope I said his name right. He'll come on in a minute and he'll, explain, his name and the angle of Diddy's case. But salute to everybody out there listening to the podcast tonight. Be sure to tune in with us every Friday night at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. So without further ado, Sam, man, I'm gonna bring the attorney in.
Let's do it.
And let's get to it, man. So you're now live with us. Can you hear us? How you doing?
Absolutely. How are you guys?
Can't hear you.
Can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah. How you doing?
Got you. Good to go.
Good. How are you guys?
Doing great. Appreciate you, reaching out and coming on the show tonight. Definitely can't wait to hear your perspective on Diddy's new case. Before you get started, how do you pronounce your name? I don't want to disrespect you.
Good question. That's the hardest question anybody's going to ask me. Shakhevich.
Cool.
Shakhevich. Got you.
Cool.
All right. So obviously we heard the bombshell news drop about this time yesterday. Cassie, former girlfriend of Diddy, former artist of Diddy, came out and accused him of rape, accused him of trafficking, accused him of a number of allegations, sending a firestorm across hip-hop, across the media, across music, and everything else. So if you may, but I mean, you know what, and I apologize. Before we get to that, give us your background. Give us your backstory, how you became an Esquire, how you're sitting here in front of us today.
Sure. So again, Dmitry Shakhevich, hard name to pronounce. If you read it, it gets a little easier if you take the H out of the middle. Criminal defense and civil litigation lawyer in New York City. I'm also a professor, and I run this YouTube channel, youtube.com/@dshacklaw, DSHAK Law, LAW, if anybody wants to take a look. And my background is an Eastern European immigrant background. Came to the U.S. when I was 3 years old. College, law school, my own law practice. That's the soup to nuts.
Powerful. So I see you on a lot of different shows, Gayle King, a lot, you're the person that they go to and talk to when something is going on, especially in New York City. Break this thing down. What's your interest in this whole Diddy case, and what do you know that you could share with the people?
Well, I don't have an interest in it. I know kind of what everybody else knows from an educated perspective, basically, okay, right? Because I do this every day in my life. So what happened is there's a civil lawsuit now, which is different to the extent some folks don't know than a criminal lawsuit, or than a criminal prosecution, rather. Nobody's going to jail here, at least not yet. There was a lawsuit filed. It takes very little in New York and around the country to file a lawsuit, right? You can't get in trouble really for filing a lawsuit when you lose, unless it's a frivolous lawsuit and you can get sanctioned for that, but that happens rarely. There is no criminal case, and that could mean a variety of different things. That could mean that the plaintiff here didn't go to the police. That could mean that she went and withdrew her complaint. That may mean that she presented whatever arguments and evidence she has, and they didn't think it was credible and reliable, sufficient to arrest, right? So we are early on here, and it's important to know that as this case moves on, it's going to be months, it's going to be maybe even years. We'll see the evidence, right? And the evidence is what matters, not what's in the press or other things. The evidence is what matters, right? What will be admissible in court before a judge or a jury, whoever will be deciding this case at some point. And it's important not to jump to any other conclusions before we know anything else.
So when you look at the situation and you see just the fire campaign that's going on, and now it seems as though an image is being tainted, because we live in a society where you're now guilty until proven innocent, and the allegations are very ugly. You said this will span over a number of months and maybe even years. Well, to what extent will we have to hear Diddy explain himself when it comes to the court of law? How much from Diddy do you assume we will hear from him? Not attorneys, not publicists or people like that, him himself.
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on really what the status of his criminal case will be, if there is any criminal case. His lawyers will at some point make a decision about whether or not he will be charged here, right? And the likelihood of that happening, you never really know 100%, but people that know this stuff can make educated decisions. And then they'll have to determine whether or not they'll let him speak. And by let him speak, I mean speak in public and speak in court, right? Be deposed. Because in a criminal case, you do have the Fifth Amendment privilege, right? You don't have to testify against yourself. In a civil case, you don't have that. So unless there's a real possibility of him being criminally charged, then he will be deposed. He will have to sit for a deposition, as all parties do in every civil case, and tell essentially his side of the story. So it really depends on that. It depends the extent of what they call criminal exposure he has.
Right. Now, is there any chance that it really could be any real evidence, being as though it was so long ago since these alleged incidents happened?
Yeah, the sexual assault cases, the ones that arose out of the Me Too movement, gave rise to a whole bunch of people that came out and said this movement is great, but I was assaulted all these years ago and now I'm out of luck. So it's great for these women, but what about me? And so what happened in a lot of these places, and in New York, for example, is they enacted a statute, right? They passed legislation extending what they call the statute of limitations, right? Allowing people to sue when they otherwise would not have. And one problem that creates is that when cases are brought that are old, right? That you saw it happen when Trump was sued, right? Evidence is lost and witnesses are lost and people forget. And so naturally with time, cases get weaker. But that doesn't necessarily mean this case will be a loser, because this is a credibility case. It will on some level come down to who a jury will believe. And that will depend on the evidence, the corroborating evidence, and the testimony.
Could there be a case where evidence is so substantial or so damning that this could be taken criminal? And if so, what are the percentages you think that is to happen?
Lawyers don't operate in percentages. That's just impossible.
Okay. So what do you think? How do you think it's going to go out?
Yeah. Look, police and prosecutors don't need a civil verdict to bring charges, right? They don't have to wait until this case ends. And they have a much faster way of gathering evidence than lawyers in a civil case. So, in that respect, these two cases aren't necessarily related, right? If they feel, or at least you'd like to hope, right, that if they feel there's enough evidence, they will effectuate an arrest. If it's the right thing to do, of course.
Right. Now, did you hear about Diddy offering to pay them, to drop the suit? Did that typically happen, or is that, in your opinion, a sign of guilt?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? The courts are interested in people settling cases, right? Because they don't want cases to clog up the system. And so one way that it does that is by telling people, if you try to settle a case, we can't use that against you in court, generally. So you can't come into court and say, well, why did you offer this money to me if you thought you were innocent, right? It doesn't really work that way. So to the extent that settlement negotiations took place, those should not generally be admitted in the actual substantive case.
Gotcha.
I want to transition just slightly, continuing with Diddy, but on a different subject. We've seen Keefe D get arrested for the murder of Tupac some time ago, maybe about a month or so ago now, and Diddy's name gets brought up pretty heavy in it when it comes to social media and various people gossiping and things like that. Do you think that there's a realistic chance, because his name is just brought up so much and it's a lot of just smoke around it, that he could be potentially brought up for questioning, charges, or whatever the case may be, in the murder of Tupac Shakur as well?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think that these decisions aren't made because there's a lot of smoke, right? You would like to think that these decisions are made based on evidence. And we have to assume, otherwise what are we doing here? Where we have to assume that cops and prosecutors act on evidence and do the right thing. And as somebody involved in the system, most do, right? But, we have to rely on that. We can't rely on the fact that, well, now there's a lot of noise surrounding this guy, and as a result of that, they're going to go after him. That's a horrible thing if that happens. Horrible.
Yeah. Right. Now, what will be in your opinion, what type of defense could Diddy have against this? Would they try to attack her credibility, meaning Cassie, or what type of defense do you take? Do you just say, no, I wasn't there? Can you kind of explain that if you can?
Well, the defense will depend on the offense, right? And we don't know the offense. So
right.
the defense will be designed at, of course, attacking her credibility.
Right.
But it'll depend, again, on what comes out in this case. The allegations, as far as I understand in this case, span over a prolonged period of time, right? They involve allegations that he had gotten her addicted to alcohol and drugs and had her engage in sex acts and other things. These are things that span over time. So, you're not going to get a smoking gun here. It's not that kind of case. You may get good pieces of evidence that prove certain things, but you're talking about allegations that involve quite frankly, I don't even know, probably years long pattern of abuse. So it'll be interesting to see what evidence comes out to support that time frame.
Yeah.
What pieces of evidence would need to be presented on Cassie's behalf for this to really take hold and for her to really show that, yeah, this is in fact exactly what she lined out it to be?
Look, there's an endless list of evidence that could be admitted here, right? Statements, videos, evidence. In a case like this, you may need an extensive set of medical records, right? To determine what was in her system, when and how, whether she was treated for it, and so on and so forth. So all of those kinds of things. But to give any real deep dive would be speculative because nobody knows. All we know right now are the allegations, which is a set of lines that were filed in court. That's all, right? We don't know the evidence, at least not to any real degree, that substantiate any of those. So we'll have to see.
Right. Now, I think earlier today, I was reading an article that said the NYPD said that there was no criminal investigation as of right now against Diddy, because some stories came out yesterday that it possibly was, but they said that it wasn't the NYPD. Another part of this case, though, Cassie was saying that Diddy threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car, who's another rapper, before it exploded in his driveway. How do you feel about that, and where do you see that possibly going? Because that's another part that, if that happened, and she's a witness to that, that could be criminal.
So, yeah, I don't know much about that. I don't know.
Okay.
This is a lawsuit. I don't know. That's, I suppose, some sort of allegation that was made. I don't know anything about it. But look, generally speaking, when somebody's in court and they go to trial, right, the system is designed to make sure that only certain pieces of evidence come into the case, right, so that the jury doesn't rely on bad information, unreliable information, right? And one of those rules of evidence is the rules of relevance. And one thing you can't do is you can't come into court and say, this person committed certain acts, and I know that because he did all this other stuff in the past, right? That's not how it works. That's what they call inadmissible character evidence. You can't do that, right? You have to connect those things to the conduct being alleged, okay? So unless there's some strong connection between other acts and the allegations, it's going to be tough to get those things in, right? It's designed to make sure that only relevant evidence comes in, and that if somebody is adjudicated to have done something wrong, that's done only on the right evidence.
Why would a case like this take an extended period of time? Is it like actual evidence itself, or is it just like time itself? Like, why would this take the amount of time you assumed earlier?
Because litigation takes a long time, and you don't know what can happen in a case like this. Will there be more parties added? Maybe, right? Will discovery take a long time? Maybe, right? Generally in litigation, right, lawyers do a little dance where they don't like to provide all of the evidence at once. They like to preserve certain pieces of evidence. Then lawyers typically fight over what pieces of evidence are admissible and what pieces of evidence aren't admissible. That may go to a hearing. You may have to conduct numerous court proceedings to figure that out. Then there's depositions, right? Depositions take a long time. Scheduling them isn't that easy. And then there are motions to determine what evidence comes in, what evidence comes out. I mean, this is a case where, it's possible that other parties will be brought in. You'll have to amend the complaint to bring in those other parties, serve those other people, right? Give those other people time to respond, to acclimate themselves. So it can just go in so many different ways. Of course, it could end in 2 months. Sure. That's just unlikely, statistically speaking.
Right. Now, the dollar amount, the $30 million. I know you can't predict this, obviously. Do you think, in your opinion, though, just your general opinion, that that's a outrageous amount to be asking for the allegations, or that standard? I mean, the guy's a billionaire, but is that an outrageous amount, in your opinion, the $30 million he's asking for?
It depends on what the evidence is. I mean,
okay.
It's look, and not because I'm trying to be coy or anything. It's very difficult.
Yeah,
it will be an entirely speculative answer, right? I mean, what do the medical records show? You're gonna have years of medical records here.
Right.
What if more females come out? Because we've seen these type of cases and situations before from the public eye, and when there's one, here comes more. I mean, it just is what it is. We see it. So what are the chances, in your opinion, we see more women? And if so, what does that mean for Diddy in this situation?
Great question. So look, the easy answer is it wouldn't be good for him, right? And the problem is that we saw this happen with Harvey Weinstein, right? Where he was alleged to have committed some crimes, and then a bunch of different women came forward. And then what the prosecutors tried to do, and that was a criminal case, this is not, but what the prosecutors tried to do is they try to bring all those women in, right? Because if they testified, it would obviously strengthen their case. And the judge said, well, hold on, we can't do that. Because if we bring in all the women, it'll prejudice him, right? No jury's going to care about the actual allegations when they see testimony of him doing this to dozens of women, or whatever the number was. It was a lot.
Right.
And same thing will happen here, right? If there are new victims that come forward, the plaintiff's lawyers will try to get that evidence into this case because it'll make their case stronger. The defense lawyers will say, well, we can't have that happen because all they're trying to do is muddy up our client so that he loses this case. Not based on this case, but based on all this other stuff, right? And the judge will typically make a decision somewhere in the middle, right? And say, okay, certain pieces of evidence stay out, certain pieces of evidence come in. Here's where we kind of split the baby, so to speak. And that's typically how these things work out. Now, those women could also sue him themselves in their own cases, assuming they can do that under the statutes, right? Anywhere in the country. So we'll see.
Right now, you got the civil side. There's no criminal side yet. If, let's just say, he was found, liable, he had to pay $30 million, and then it turned criminal, would they be able to use that civil case in the criminal proceedings, or is that totally different?
So again, as I said at the top, it depends on what happens in the civil case, right? His lawyers, as this case goes on, may determine, hey, we may have a problem criminally here, so we're not going to let him testify in the civil case. And then they may not have much to use. Now, of course, they're going to have the civil case documents to use, the discovery, but his testimony is what matters, and they may be able to keep that out.
Right. Now, it's probably advisable for him not to say anything, because sometimes you see people that get sued, they want to go on IG Live, Facebook, and talk about it. It's probably good for him now just to be quiet and let his lawyers work behind the scenes, obviously.
Absolutely right. And let's not forget, he's been down this road before. He was tried in that gun case in the late 90s, right? He has the same lawyer now that he had then. It was a great lawyer here in New York. So it's not his first rodeo, right? He knows what to do and what not to do. And, he's a smart, savvy man. There's no way to deny that. So he's not going to do anything stupid, I'd imagine.
We live in a different age now where public perception is thrown in our face heavier than it's ever been before. How much does public perception influence these type of cases, and how much, if any, will influence this type of situation because it's disgusting right now. And I don't mean disgusting in a bad way because I don't know what's going on. I mean, the amount of stuff is insane. It's disgusting how much stuff we see.
Yeah.
So how much did that influence this type of situation, this type of case?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's, that's probably more of a public relations question than it is a legal question. But you would hope, right? You would hope that the judge in this case, who will be the person making the rulings, right, before it gets to a jury, can operate independent of that, right? Look, I mean, as bad as it sounds, we have to rely on the actors of the justice system to do the right thing. Judges, prosecutors, cops, right? We just have to. And there have been instances where they haven't, right? But if we lose that hope, then that's a bad road to go down. So we would have to hope that the judge assigned to this case, this is a federal case in the Southern District, which is the most qualified court in the country, really. That's where they do all the big cases. The judges there are uniquely credentialed and very highly qualified. And so they don't mess around. They do the right thing. And you would hope that's the case here.
Now, the fact that it took her so long to come forward with these allegations, I'm sure that has to hurt the case, as opposed to her coming out a week or a month after they broke up. It's been years. So that's going to hurt the case because now evidence that could have been available might be gone, right?
Sure. And every lawyer worth his salt will explore that on cross-examination, right? There will be a million things that the defense lawyers here will deal with, and that's one of them, right? And they'll certainly question her as to why it took so long. Why couldn't you do this earlier? Why couldn't you do it this time or that time, right? It'll be a big point, right? If somebody claims that they suffered a certain amount and then don't complain about it right away, at least there's an argument to be made. There's a whole bunch of science behind why victims do what they do. But certainly a lawyer could try to make an argument that hurts the case.
Piggyback off my cousin's question, how much does time influence a case? I mean, obviously from an evidence standpoint, but in general, like, would it influence it more if it happened in a shorter span of time than years upon years? Like, how does that influence it?
Well, if it happened right away, right, then you can gather evidence or not gather it. But you can't blame evidence leaving on time. And in this case, you can, right? You can say that, hey, there's no way that the victim could have this evidence because it's been so long, right? If it was a short period of time, and by the way, that's a good argument for the defense, right? The defense will say, hey, she's bringing this case. She doesn't have this evidence. That's on her, right? That's the argument they're going to make. Because don't forget, the burden is on the plaintiff in these cases. Not as high a burden as there would be in a criminal case, but still, the burden is on the plaintiff. And so the fact that evidence is going to be lost in this case, presumably, is something that can't help.
Now, do you believe that she went? I mean, obviously, you go to the police and detectives for something like this, and so far they decided not to charge Diddy. So does that kind of tell you anything when they don't want to go forward criminally, and now they're going forward civilly? That it might not be as much as smoke as there is fire.
Well, yeah, but look, the police department knows that if and when they arrest him, he's going to hire good lawyers. They better have their T's crossed and I's dotted, right? So maybe they won't rush. That's number one.
Okay.
Right? That's number one. Number two, don't forget, in a criminal case, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, very high. You better have a lot of evidence if you're going to convict P. Diddy beyond the reasonable doubt of a years-long crime, right? So it may just be that. Maybe they're just still investigating, right? The standard in a civil case is preponderance of the evidence, right? More likely than not, which is 51%, which is not insurmountable even on bad evidence, right? Criminal cases are a bit different. Before the government in a case like this allocates all the money that it will on prosecuting somebody like this, it's going to do its research. And that could be one of the reasons why he hasn't been charged yet. It may be that there's no evidence and they dropped it. Who knows? But, it could be that too.
For the people watching, for the people who are going to be invested in this case, who want to see fairness, who want to see justice, but also carry a level of human emotion to it, whether they like Diddy or don't like Diddy. What would be the best advice to give them as a person directly in these courtrooms and seeing these type of cases, to kind of how to check the temperature and view this thing from a neutral standpoint? What's the best advice you would give the people watching as far as from an emotional standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. The best advice is to wait for the evidence to come out. That's the best advice. Federal trials aren't like state trials. You're not going to be able to get in and infiltrate that courtroom the same way you can in state court, right? You can't videotape. There are no cameras in federal court. So you will be limited as to what you can see. But track the evidence. Track what will be filed in terms of motions and other things, because that's what will matter, right? All this other stuff doesn't matter, right? All this other stuff is, may matter, as you mentioned, from a public relations perspective. Sure. But it doesn't necessarily matter from a legal perspective. And that's what's important. At the end of the day, when this case is up for a trial, assuming it doesn't settle, which it may, but if it gets to trial, there will be evidence that is used in this case to either win it or lose it. And that's what matters, not all the other stuff.
Powerful. I want to ask you a few more questions here. Now, Cassie, right? Let's just say we find out that, her credibility is shot. This was all a big lie, money grab, whatever. What recourse would Diddy have in a court of law to go after her, maybe sue her? I don't know if there's any criminal charges for that. Can you kind of speak on that aspect?
Sure. Look, there's a really big interest that we have in this country of not punishing victims of crimes and of bad acts, right? So the courts limit the ways you can go after somebody if they sued you and lost. In order for him to pursue her, he's going to have to show essentially that she commenced this case knowing she was going to lose, which is a very, very, very high standard to me.
Right.
Let's say allegedly, or let's just say hypothetically speaking, she went to therapy and disclosed a lot of personal information to a therapist. Could they subpoena that information, or is that like violating some type of law?
So the way that works is, that's actually a great question. The way that works is the same way it would work for a lawyer or a doctor, right? There are privileges in place.
Yeah.
And so in order to violate the privilege, generally, you can only do that if there's a court order in place, right? And so the judge here would have to issue an order saying, all right, you can share this information, and here's the degree to which you can share it. So that's really how that works. Obviously, professionals fight that. I've had cases myself where my client was sued in some other case and they tried to get my file, and I fought it, right? Because when a client hires you, the client expects you to preserve their interests. And same thing with the therapist, maybe even more so. So that's a complex area, and it's typically a fight.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If you have anything else that you want to add, to the case, anything that we missed, go ahead and add that aspect as well. Tell people, where you practice and what you do as well, again, if they missed it.
Sure. So yeah, the big 2 points here, right? Number one, split the criminal and the civil, right? This isn't a criminal case yet. So words like he's innocent or he's guilty or he's going to jail, that's not a conversation you should be having. Even if he was charged, he is still presumed innocent. Here, he's not even charged. So he's, you should certainly presume him innocent. That's number one. And number two, wait for the evidence to come out before making any conclusions, before drawing any conclusions. Just wait to see what the evidence shows, because courts determine what evidence is reliable. They have rules for that. And that's what will matter in this case.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on. I'll say your last name one more time.
Shakhevich.
Esquire Shakhevich on the Hip Hop Uncensored Podcast. I got one more question in closing.
Go ahead.
Definitely appreciate your time. Definitely appreciate the people doing anything in the chat, doing anything. Continue to do that. Worst case scenario for Diddy in this situation. Best case scenario for Diddy in this situation.
Well, the worst case scenario is that he goes to trial and loses, and then he's owed a whole lot of money. That's the direct worst case scenario.
Right.
If you're asking me hypothetically, the worst case scenario as it relates to these allegations is, who knows? He could be charged criminally. We'll see. And then depending on the charges, that could be a real problem.
Right.
Now, in terms of the best case scenario is that he'll get this case dismissed, or at the very least, settle it in a quiet way where, you know, his reputation will remain intact and there will be no admission of wrongdoing and so on and so forth. That's typically how these cases end.
Appreciate that.
Yes, we got NYC attorney Shakhevich on the Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. Everybody listening in, make sure that you go into the description box and go follow his channel now. Also, if you got any other social media handles or if you want to put your practice out there, yeah, you're welcome to do that as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. One of the benefits of having a unique name is that you can just use it for basically everything. So I use D Shaq Law for everything: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as well. So if folks want to reach out, ask questions, I'm always available. And if they want to check out my YouTube, I post a whole lot of legal stuff on there if you're interested in that kind of thing. And I hope to see everybody again soon. And thank you for having me on.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure's all ours. Appreciate you. Take care, man. Have a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good one.
Take care.
All right. Definitely. So yeah, great discussion tonight, Sam, man. We got a powerful one for him tomorrow as well, man. Tell him about it.
We cooking up heat. You know what I mean? We're making this feel like it's 2017, 2018. This motherfucker. We bringing it back. We having a good time. Back live for the first time in some time on a Friday night is very nostalgic. We've been doing some nostalgic shit the last couple of weeks, man, and it's feeling good to get back to the essence, to get back to the roots, and we can't wait to continue, to get back to you guys live and interact with you guys and have a good time. And that was a great conversation. I wanted to end by saying his name, but I ain't gonna lie, I forgot the shit again.
Yeah, I remember he just said it.
Yeah, but
Shakhevich.
Yeah, man. But that was a good interview. I'm glad he gave some great insight, and we got another great interview tomorrow, and it's gonna give us another lane. So very dope.
Yeah, stay tuned in, stay locked in with us. Like I said, subscribe, hit the like button, all that good stuff. We're gonna keep bringing you that heat. So check in with us every Friday night at 5:30. It'd be either me and him going in about something, recapping a week, or we're gonna have a special guest on. So make sure you be ready. 5:30 p.m. You might be on the way home, you might be cooking. We hope to have you in the building. Hey, that's your brother Sam Mint, Viral Hip Hop News. I'm your brother O God. Hip Hop News Uncensored together with a Hip Hop Uncensored podcast. Over and out.
Peace. Love y'all.
And love y'all. And definitely shout out to all the moderators and the people in the chat as well. Yeah, have a good night. Peace.